So apparently, somehow, and I don't know how she did it, but Rania Khalek had an interview with Jamal Bowman. Now, this is kind of a shock to those of us on the left because the squad members, for the most part, once they enter Congress, they were not doing interviews with left independent media. So I was surprised when this interview appeared, and it was on my homepage on YouTube. I was like, what? And so I was like, let me listen to this and see what he's talking about, right? So Jamal Bowman, now that he is no longer a member of Congress, has a lot to say about what went down when he was a member of Congress. It's a long story, but he's going to get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to hear this. Grab some tea because it is hot in here. Listen to this.
Wait, I want to stop you right there because I actually like with the J Street trip, right? Because I remember you went on the J Street trip and this upset many Palestinian rights advocates who felt it was like normalizing with Israel and Zionists. So can you explain your thinking with that at that time? And I'm just curious if you saw that backlash, if it made you maybe reconsider it all, and then what made you decide to go anyway?
Yeah. So probably a lot of the advocates and organizers that you're talking about, I probably didn't know them or wasn't aware of them or not in community with them at that time. Me personally, maybe the Justice Democrats were, maybe my chief of staff was, but my whole mindset was, I got a large Jewish constituency, right? I need to go there because I can't be talking out my ass and I never been there, right? And so I already knew what I felt like as I was reading and talking to people and learning, because I was fortunate. I had like Jewish Voices for Peace and If Not Now and others who were like advising me before I went there, right? And before and during the race. So I was familiar with it, right? I was familiar with the Nakba. I was familiar with we don't have two states. I was familiar with 67 borders, right? And like how because of 700,000 settlements, we don't have, 67 borders are like obsolete. So I was familiar with all that, but I wanted to go to experience it because it gives me more credibility when I talk about it coming back. If I'm talking about it without going, it's less credibility, right?
Pause. So why was this controversial at the time? It was controversial because Jamal Bowman was a member of DSA, Democratic Socialists of America. And one of the things that they are not supposed to do is they are not supposed to go to Israel, right? So DSA, they have a whole section in their handbook that discusses the Israel-Gaza, Palestine issue. And what they're supposed to do is to support BDS, obviously understand the history, the creation of Israel and what it did to the Palestinian people, but also the big one, they're not supposed to go to Israel. So Jamal Bowman broke that line. And after that, there were strong discussions about removing Jamal Bowman from DSA. So let's continue.
And, on a personal level, Rashida's like my sister, right? I love her. And I remember when they stopped her from going to see her grandmother.
Yeah.
And I remember wanting to go on a personal level, like I'm going to go and I'm going to go see her grandmother. So anyway, I went. I went with J Street. And again, at this time, J Street is, in my mind, not AIPAC light, but like a little bit more progressive than AIPAC, right? So they're like the good progressive group at this time. And so I went with them. And I still give them credit, right? Because when I went, in my opinion, it wasn't no propaganda trip, right? We spoke to breaking the silence, right? We went to Ramallah and spoke to leaders. We went to Hebron and visited a school and spoke to children. I was stopped at a checkpoint and I couldn't walk by. We spoke to organizers. I'm forgetting the name. There's a group of like Israeli Jews and Israeli Palestinians. Forgive me if I'm mislabeling them. But there's a group working together. What's the name of them?
One of these. They have these like peace, quote unquote peace groups where like the two sides talk.
Correct. So I got to meet with scholars from the whole spectrum and organizers and activists from the whole spectrum. So I really appreciated the trip. Right? You can't. Like when you go, I wasn't allowed to go to Gaza because we couldn't get clearance from the U.S. or Israel, so I only got to go to West Bank, Palestine. Yo, when you go, first of all, like there's like gates and shit to get into the West Bank, right? So that's right there bugged out. There's a giant wall around the shit, right? Mm-hmm. There's burned out cars stacked on top of each other. There's abject poverty. There's checkpoints everywhere. You can't move. When you experience that, that's why Ta-Nehisi Coates talking about it now. Like, I know exactly what he means, right? Like, segregation, Jim Crow, and all that, it's in a black man's DNA, especially when you're a conscious black man, which I try to be. And so when I went there and experienced that, I'm like, this is crazy. And so anyway, November, my first term, I went there, came back and, again, got more active, got more vocal and a couple of other pivot points. And I'm probably, jumping around in terms of time.
No, that's totally fine.
Initially, like I supported the Oslo Accords, right? And then I took my name off it, right? The so-called peace agreement, the normalization peace agreement, right? So like that experience helped make that shift, for example. Rashida had a Nakba resolution, like right around the time of the end of my first re-election, and I like co-sponsored it, right? And this obviously got me a bunch of backlash. So it's basically the more I learned, the more I spoke out and just became more active.
And then, I just, it's really interesting because, J Street, obviously, like for those of us who've been inside the Palestine solidarity movement, and it's been like kind of our number one thing. It's like we're very antagonistic towards J Street because it's still a Zionist organization, right? And so it's interesting that their trip for you had that impact on you, but I also think it's interesting what you're saying about being there as a black man. And it's similar to what Ta-Nehisi Coates describes as well, which is like, yeah, you can't not see segregation when it's right in front of your face. Yeah. I'm curious if, I guess moving past your trip there, obviously you come out with a different understanding. Then October 7th happens. And then I'm curious how October 7th may have shifted your view of this issue, because I think it radicalized everybody more than they already were, because it really demonstrated just how genocidal the Israeli project is. But you were also still you're still in Congress now. But you're before your primary, you were also criticized widely. Here's another tough question. Criticized widely on the left for voting for the Iron Dome. It'll come as no surprise to you that I personally definitely shared the criticism of voting for the Iron Dome for the fact that, it's, the Iron Dome I know it's promoted as a defensive mechanism, but it essentially shields Israel from the consequences for bombing all of its neighbors, for constantly stealing land. I guess my question is, and I think a lot of people who are watching would wonder, why did you vote for it? And has your view of the Iron Dome changed today from when you did vote for that bill?
Yes, Rania, yes. That is the question, because a lot of us remember when some of them voted for the Iron Dome. I think AOC ended up voting present. And that was another moment where their vote, because they had that narrow majority, their vote could have made a significant difference, right? The Iron Dome vote happened first, and then October 7th happened. So thank you, Rania, for asking that question, because I wanted to know too, girl.
View has definitely changed. And at that time when I voted for it, I would say, let's say my learning and evolution is like an A to Z process. At that time when I voted for it, I was probably at like a G or H in the process, right, of learning. But I think even taking a step back away from that, I still have a large Jewish constituency. And I do have a responsibility to represent all constituents in my district. And if the majority of them wanted me to vote for the Iron Dome, which they did, it's part of my responsibility to vote for that. That, in addition to that, communication and propaganda is a big part of our business, right? Of our work. And so I didn't want to send the perception or misperception that I was okay with Jewish people being killed Again, this is at this time of my evolution, right? So I didn't want my district to think, oh, he doesn't care if we get bombed and killed, which wasn't true. I don't want nobody to be killed, including Palestinians.
So what that tells you, ladies and gentlemen, is that there was pressure from a certain demographic of his constituents for him to vote for that bill. But it also tells you that he did not know what he was really voting on. This is a problem. But I mean, like, honestly, like, how many times are these representatives voting on bills and they don't really know what they're voting on? And they're just voting the way they were told to vote. So he didn't really fully understand what the Iron Dome was. So this is not a good thing. I mean, he's openly admitting this. And again, if Jamal Bowman would have won his race, he would not be having this conversation. I can probably assure you that. But we're getting the tea now, right? So it makes you wonder how many representatives are voting on legislation and they're not really aware what they're voting on.
So that was then. Of course, now, right? So first of all, on my trip, there was this moment where an Israeli soldier is giving us a tour of we got to see the Iron Dome and what it was, the defense system. And during this tour, I said something like, yo, why don't Palestinians have an Iron Dome? And you should have seen how this dude jumped out his skin to like attack me for even asking the question.
Wow.
And I'm like, yo, they got a right to defend themselves too. You know what I'm saying? And if it's just a defense system, they need to be able to defend themselves from missiles coming, right? Like, so that was my logic. So even on that trip, I asked the question and his answer was bugged out. But fast forward to now, of course, like that, you know, the Iron Dome is a representation and another weapon to use in continued apartheid, oppression, open air prison, occupation, and now the genocide, but ultimately the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, right?
But Jamal Bowman, if you guys would have still been in the know with left independent media, again, like I said, all these people were on left independent media, and then once they won their races, they just pieced out. You never saw these people. It was just like they were only appear onto corporate media, right? So if Jamal Bowman and other members of the squad, if they would have still kept the community that they had in left independent media, and they still would have been appearing on left independent media, you would have known that, Jamal. Like, that's the thing. There are a number of people in left independent media that are very good on this issue, like Katie Halper. Like, Katie Halper is obviously very good on this issue, and she's interviewed squad members before like they won, right? So if you would have had this conversation, if you still would have been engaging with left independent media, you would have known that. You would have known what the Iron Dome really was about. But you guys decided to distance yourself from left independent media the moment that you won those seats. And so you can't really, I mean, it just, I didn't feel like he was really trying to know either. I didn't feel like he was really trying to find out and know either, because he said that Rashida is like a sister to him. Rashida Tlaib knows about the Iron Dome. She knows, the bad things about the Iron Dome. So you said she's like a sister to you, but you didn't go to her and ask her for the Palestinian perspective about the Iron Dome. You spoke to, your Jewish constituents, but you didn't go to the woman who's like a sister to you to ask her about the Palestinian perspective. Am I alone in this?
And so that's why I'm like, not only would I never vote for that again if I was still in Congress, unless there was like some like, okay, we're gonna actually have a Palestinian state, 67 borders, get like our dream. Like, if our dream come true, where Palestine has a full military and everything it needs, whatever. But right now, like, no, that wouldn't be the case, because we see what's happening now, and it's freaking crazy.
Okay, that's one piece. Please go watch the full interview, and if you're a patron, you get to see, like, there's this interview, which is 39 minutes. But if you're a patron of Breakthrough News, you get to see the full interview, which is a little bit over an hour, I believe. So watch that. But then there's this part as well, because this right here tells me he gets into Kamala Harris's campaign. And I did not know about this until this interview. And when you hear this from Jamal Bowman, what this is going to tell you is that almost kind of sounds like they weren't really trying to win. Is it a long story? Maybe, maybe not. Listen to this.
Oh, there was a lot of pressure.
Oh, wait, is this the wrong one? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry. I went to the wrong one. Here we go. Them not trying to win. Listen to this.
A couple of days after my race, I was completely exhausted, but I still went to a commitment that I had at Georgetown University to speak to some young people. And it was a great meeting, great conversation. And one of the young people asked me, can the Democratic Party be reformed? And my instinctive answer was no. Like, the Democratic Party cannot be reformed. This was 2 days after my primary. Now, obviously, I might have been bitter and upset and all those things, but it's how I felt at the time, because the way it went down in my race was crazy. And that was a microcosm of what just happened with Trump. Like, you discard a middle school principal, Black, working class, that young people and working class people actually love, not just in this district, but nationally. You allow them to be attacked, discarded by AIPAC money, which is both Trump money and, crypto money and all kind of other stuff. Y'all allow that to happen. And then several months later, you need those same people that Jamal represented to help you win, and you don't engage them and you get crushed. And even more importantly, or as important, another anecdote for you. And by the way, these are all exclusive. I'm giving you mad exclusive. I ain't say these things nowhere else.
Breaking news.
But I engaged the Harris campaign, and I want to emphasize this, right? Because I love Black people, and I love all people, but I really love Black people. So I give Kamala Harris a bunch of grace because she's a Black woman, right? So when I say Harris campaign, I don't mean her necessarily. I mean these people around her, which I know.
So he's talking about the consultants, right? He's talking about the consultant group for Kamala's campaign.
People around her, which I know the consultant class is crazy. I engage them first around the Black man's agenda, like I organized Black men from across the country to give me feedback, got them their agenda. Much of what we gave them made to the agenda. Good money. I then told them, I can share text with you so you have evidence of this. I am ready to be dispatched to any parts of the country. Let me know. I want to go to Michigan in particular, right? I told them this.
So this is something that we didn't know. So apparently Jamal Bowman offered to help Kamala Harris's campaign in Michigan, because apparently he does have a popular following. Apparently he's popular in Michigan. So he offered to help in particular, especially because of the Gaza issue. Listen to what happened. You're going to laugh at this one.
They never get back to me. Even worse, they send Richie Torres, Bill Clinton, and Liz Cheney to Michigan. So again, and not only that, Bill Clinton is scolding Arab Americans.
Yeah.
Like, yo, they were there first. Pretty much they were there first. Y'all got to just deal with it or leave. Like, this is what their campaign decided to do. Let's not send Jamal Bowman there, who, again, I have, thank God, alhamdulillah, right? Like, so much support in Michigan where, like, my opponent attacked me for it. Like, he literally was like, you don't represent your district. You represent California and Dearborn, Michigan. My opponent said this shit in a debate.
Wow.
Okay? So that is how, and he said that because he knows that's an Arab American community.
Yeah, Dan. That's like ranch racist.
I want to go there.
Yeah.
Right? Y'all ignore me, which tells me who you have around you in your campaign, but you send Bill Clinton and Richie Torres. So
So listen to that, ladies and gentlemen. So this is really interesting. Out of all the people to send, they sent Richie Torres, who is very, very much anti-Palestinian, a pro-Israel whack job. Like, that guy's crazy. He loves Israel more than he loves the Bronx. He talks about Israel more than he talks about his own constituents in the Bronx. And the Bronx is what? The poorest district in New York City. So he talks more about Israel than he does the Bronx. So I have a number of people in the show that live in the Bronx that are not happy with Richie Torres. That's who they chose to send there. So like I said, it's almost like they weren't trying to win. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Makes you wonder if it was just about raising money, if it's just about fundraising, and that's all they care about. Makes you wonder. Now, there was one more piece to this. I want to make sure I did not miss this part.
To right after October 7th, condemn, denounce.
Oh, sorry, guys. Sometimes YouTube does this. Where are we? 2636. Let me do that. Ba, 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 ba. Okay. So we were
Join us.
26.
Yeah, and I guess that goes back to the October 7th issue, because you mentioned to right after October 7th, condemn, denounce, basically say Israel can do whatever it wants. Tell me what was happening in Congress at that time. What kind of pressure were you getting from the AIPACs and everybody else?
It's funny. After October 7th, I actually started feeling less pressure, because it was just like, it is what it is, right? Like, so October 7th happens, and listen, of course, we condemn the killing of any innocent people. Like, that's just in any context, right? October 7th happens. I swear it was the next day, probably October 8th. There's a resolution on all of our desks condemning October 7th and just saying a whole bunch of other stuff. And I'm like, okay, AIPAC had to write this resolution. Because one of the first lines was like, Hamas's unprovoked attacks. And I'm like, wait a minute, man. Like, see, so we're just going to start lying? Like, what do you mean unprovoked? They're living in apartheid. Like, there's settlement violence that year. The settlement violence was at record numbers. And there's 75 years of Nakba. Why are we saying unprovoked? I can't. And I'm like, I can't sign. I cannot support this resolution. Not only that, everyone, like president, mayors, governors, senators, everybody immediately, we stand with Israel, we stand with the Jews, right? Was the rhetoric. The other rhetoric was from Netanyahu and others, we're going to respond. They are human animals. We're cutting off food and water and electricity. And we're going to attack tomorrow. And they've been attacking ever since. So I'm like, so again, it was clear for me, like, these people are going to commit. And what was the phrase? They said, remember what Amalek did to you. So he referenced the genocide before they attacked.
Yep.
So I'm like, so there was no pressure. It was super clear. Like, we cannot support this, and we need something else. And thank God, Rashida and Corey, a couple, maybe 10 days or so later, introduced the ceasefire resolution. I'm like, yes, let's sign on to this, and let's go from there. And then the way things manifested locally in connection with this gave more clarity. So, there was and forgive me for giving this long answer, but I want to give you these other points. So there was a Westchester for Israel rally days after the October 7th attacks. I did not want to go, because I was not going to go to anything that was like for Israel, right? I wasn't going to go to that because, again, I felt that we were, of course, the community was grieving, and I'm not discounting that, but we as leaders were being dishonest. We weren't having a full conversation. And so I wasn't going to go. My chief of staff, who I love, who has to make sure I'm doing the things right politically, she's like, please go, Jamal. Please go. Like, you please go to support, so they can't say you didn't go. So I'm like, we had a fight, and we never fight because I always listen to her. But I'm like, I don't want to go, but you want me to go, I'm going to go. So we reached out to them and told them I was coming. They told me, don't come.
Wow.
There's too much anger in the community. Do not come. So I'm like, what? Did I commit the attacks, right? But this is captures how they treated me from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then try to flip it as if I'm some anti-Semite or something.
So this is important, guys. And the thing that I was going to say is that, remember, Jamal Bowman's district also changed. I'm not sure if everybody remembers that, but when his district was redrawn, like New York City districts for voting purposes are crazy. Like they redrew his district. And apparently when that happened, his constituents changed a little bit, right? And so the reason why I wanted you to hear this is because I think it's important to know what's happening behind the scenes. This does not excuse Jamal Bowman, though. Like, bruh, you could have had this conversation on Left Independent Media when that was happening. You could have had this conversation on Left Independent Media when all of these things that you're talking about were going down at that time. The fact that it's like now you want to come forward, like, and maybe it's a fear thing of, I don't want to go tell people how I really feel because then they're going to try to get me out of my seat and I'm going to lose my seat, but you lost your seat anyway. So this is why I always tell people, please just be true to yourself, regardless. And yeah, it may mean you may lose some damn things. Okay. It may mean you may not get that promotion that you want or whatever, but you'll be able to sleep better at night because you were true to yourself. I think that's very important. So it's a good interview to watch. Make sure you watch the whole thing. Because like I said, he goes through what happened while he was in Congress during that time. So especially interesting story. But at the same time, another good thing about that conversation is that it seems like, and I saw the full one on Patreon, so just keep that in mind. It almost seems like he's trying to build something else outside of the two-party system, because again, he said he doesn't think the Democratic Party can be reformed. Having been there, he doesn't think so. And he was a part of the squad too. So what does that tell you about AOC and Ilhan and all of them? They know it can't be reformed either. But it sounded like he was trying to start something else on the outside, like apart from all of that. It's interesting. I don't know. Like, I didn't have this show when Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush and all of them won. Like, I started this show in 2021. I think it was right after Force the Vote. So I wasn't a part of the left media that did interview squad members. But I will say, I think it was a terrible mistake for them to choose to distance themselves from left independent media or any independent media, to be honest. I think that was a mistake, because had he kept that type of relationship, that's the thing. Like, the media, the community would have gone to bat for you, knowing we would have known what was happening and they would have gone to bat for you. But because you decided to distance yourself. Also, I know Roger's in the chat. I remember Roger had approached Jamal Bowman a couple of times, and Roger, was asking him about, what about this? What is your plan to do that? And Jamal Bowman was kind of nasty. See, Jamal Bowman's really chill and stuff in that interview with Ronnie and now because he's not in Congress. But during that time when activists were approaching Jamal Bowman was not nice. These are just things I remember. So sorry. This is weird, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not telling you to feel sorry for Jamal Bowman, but I do think it was interesting to hear what was happening behind the scenes. Wouldn't have been behind the scenes if he would have kept that community with the left independent media. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.